For today's first Fireside Chat, please welcome to the stage President of Genomic Medicine and Head of Sustainability at Cytiva, Emmanuel Abate. And today's moderator, Newsweek Environmental Sustainability and Governance Editor, Jeff Young.
Emmanuel, thank you so much.
Jeff, good to see you.
Yeah. Well, so thanks very much for being here. We're going to dive into some interesting topics today, especially the notion of how we get our hands around the full scope of emissions from business activity. And I know this is something you've been deeply engaged with and have given a lot of thought to. Sure. But let's start big picture. Give me a sense of your industry sector as a whole, biopharma. What scale of emissions are we talking about, and how can we put that in terms that people can relate to?
Sure. Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. Maybe just a quick word of Cytiva and why I think we're trying to be relevant in that conversation. But Cytiva is one of the 3 or 4 big supplier of biomanufacturing solutions. So think about making monoclonal antibodies or cell therapy. We provide the manufacturing chain, right? And we sit right in the middle of that biopharma ecosystem. We have 25 plants around the world. So a nice global presence that I think give us a good sense of the challenges that the biopharma industry faces with sustainability. And I think something that is fairly unique to our industry is like, look, we're not petrochemicals, right? We're not one of the big massive emitters, but we have specific challenge. Single-use plastics, for instance, is one that are critical to making drugs, and so how we address it. And interestingly, if you look at our footprint, the footprint of this industry, look, our plants are relatively small, are not necessarily super heavy from an emission standpoint, but our supply chain is complex, is very diverse, is very spread out. We rely enormously on air freight, for instance. So I think there is complexity in the sense that you can tackle what you look at your plants and you work on them, and that's okay. That maybe you address 10 or 15% of the problem. The rest is spread out enormously, and that's the main challenge for our industry.
Clearly, and so you've touched on this, but where do you find the bulk of emissions arise? Yeah. You've mentioned the supply chain. What are we talking about?
So if I break it down in big pieces, I would say our scope 1 and 2. So what we buy and emit, probably 15% of our emission. Then another 15 to 20% is transportation, logistic, air freight, right? And the rest, 60%, is our supply base, our suppliers, the material they use, and that's sort of the big pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are your options there? If 15% is transport,
yeah.
What are your options for bringing emissions down?
Yeah, I think once we've addressed our industrial footprint, the next big thing is moving from air to land or air to boat. We call it airless. That's the program we've been driving at Cytiva, which is challenging in and of itself because it's a profound reconsideration of our supply chain. Where do you hold inventories? We have products that are very fragile, very strict cold chain. So how do you manage that when you shift modes of transport? So there is a whole story here to be addressed. That is not something that you solve just like that in a matter of months. You need to work with your supplier, with your customers, and transform the business model. The other big chapter for us is what we call sustainable by design, and how do you rethink your products from the start? Okay, now what's important to understand is for us, changing a single-use bags that is used to make vaccines might seem easy, but when you start doing that, you need to address complete requalification with the FDA because that material touches the drug substance or the drug product. So again, it's a significant regulatory effort that you need to do with customers. And so I think what's relatively unique to our industry is that 60% of what we emit, in order to solve it, you need to work hand in hand with your supplier and customers to do that together. It's really a collective effort.
This obviously implies a high degree of collaboration.
Yep.
Talk to me about how do you do that? How do you communicate up along the supply chain to try to achieve reductions?
So, I think, it's a mix of top-down, all right? So we got to do it. And frankly, I think if I look at the large pharma or biggest customers, they've been very committal to net zero and targets. So at some point, they're like, this is got to be table stake, and so they put pressure through the whole ecosystem. So that's one way to do it. But I think also, what's interesting is how do you help, in particular, your suppliers get better? Okay, so it's one thing to push down your target and your metric and your expectation, and ultimately maybe use it as a way to select who you want to work with. But I think what we're also trying to do is like, okay, how do we get better together? Because my footprint is your footprint in a way, right? So how do we sit around the table? And if I take air shipment, and we've had some good stories with some of our large customers where we've transferred some of our shipments from air to sea or air to rail. And at the end of the day, it's about shared commitment and shared interest. And I think it changes the level of the conversation, right? It's really about doing something together that is outside of the normal course of business. And frankly, I think it creates a level of intimacy between partners that I've not seen prior to leading sustainability.
Interesting. So I'm wondering, do you realize other benefits, aside from the sustainability goals that you've set out with these collaborative conversations? Are you finding that in that process you're getting other benefits from that?
And it's I think we commissioned a survey 6 months ago. We interviewed 800 of the biopharma players to understand their commitments to sustainability, the progress they are making, etc. And interestingly, there is a correlation. I don't know if it's a causality, but a correlation between those that would call the leaders in the space and those that have good business performance. Okay, and I think it sort of makes sense, right? Because at the end of the day, at least when you start sustainability, frankly, it's about good practices. ISO 14001 is about how you run the plant in the right way. Looking for emission savings, it's about waste management, it's about lean, it's about doing things in the right way. So I'd say, when you get a program started, at first we're like, wow, it's going to be a big cost burden to the business. And there is no question that you add cost at some point. But when you get started, you have savings. You have savings automatically. I mean, you switch off the light, you save, right? And in years of high energy cost, like we've seen the past couple of years, where there is savings. So, I think very often we say, well, we're not going to get started because it's too expensive. The reality is if you start early, and at least the first couple of years and the first, let's say, 20, 30% come with significant economic savings. It's about good business practices, right?
And do you find that you're driving change up the supply chain? And is that through collaboration or sometimes through, I don't want to say coercion, but
yeah, we do.
You have some sway in this relationship.
No, we do. We're not exerting coercion yet, right? And I think, let's be clear, there is any supplier here. We're not. So we don't. But I think. Look, there is interest, but it's not easy, right? Getting started, finding, and especially when I talk about, everybody can switch to renewable electricity, mapping your supply chain. We started a massive effort 18 months ago where we're doing, data gathering through our entire supply chain. 18 months into it, we're I'd say 30 or 40% done. Okay, and so there is, if you want to get to the end of it, it's a long-term, sustained effort. Okay, and again, it's something that we do it with our suppliers, right? Helping do it, doing it help them do it as well, right? So I think again, it's really about collaborative effort. So we're not being too coercive at this point. At some point we will. I think at some point we will. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So you've touched on this, but as a consumer, and I think for most of us, the way we interact with the medical community and medical settings, something I'm always struck by is that thing you mentioned about single-use plastics especially.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that? Because I understand they're essential.
They're essential.
To
I mean,
your
no
line of
single-use
work.
plastic, no COVID vaccine, let's be very clear, right? And no gene therapy, and no monoclonal antibodies, and no nothing, right? And on top of that, we used to produce all these drugs in steel, and what we've come to realize is that the total footprint of using single-use is actually smaller than using steel that you need to have to wash and rewash, etc. So
because of the energy and
because of the energy you save, right? So it is the best possible way to do it, even from an environmental footprint, but it still has a footprint. So how do we do it? Look, I mean, I think solving for plastic is a UN magnitude effort, right? It's huge. So, we do it step by step. The first thing we do is we offer a recycling option to our customers, okay? Let's take them back. Let's make something useful out of it. We partner with leading universities to try to find, enzymes that can degrade those plastics. So, I think a lot of it is, frankly, science is still to be invented. So we're trying to be pragmatic and offer recycling options. And then we're investing with partners to try to define the next generation of plastics, right?
So we have just about a minute left and put you on the spot a little bit. But if you have to really quickly summarize, what's the secret to really driving change on this issue?
I think it starts with commitment, and we're very, very clear. You have to commit externally, right? That's the driving force. So, Cytiva and Danaher are net zero commit also. It starts there, right? And then you drive engagement and culture change through the organization. It is contagious. And when I started 5 years ago, in a good way, when I started 5 years ago, there was 100 people. Now we have thousands of people that are engaged. It brings meaningful change. It helps attract talent. It's fun. Sometimes we go to a plant and we spend a week. We call that a Kaizen, and we do end-to-end, and we clean the plant, right? And you come with tangible effort, right? But you got to commit. You got to commit externally. I think that's where it starts, and then you drive the culture through shared success and collective effort, right?
Well, I think that's our time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Can we round of applause, please?
Thank you.